Stan Gibilisco, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV Whiskey 1. Good vibrations at your service. To describe a technique that I wish I'd thought of when I had the opportunity back in 1967-68, that was when I first got my general class license in Rochester, Minnesota, and became WA0, Oscar, King, Victor. Those were the phonetics back then. But I couldn't use voice quite yet when I first got the license. I still had the old SX-130 Helicrafters receiver and the old Viking Adventurer transmitter. I was still on crystal control for a little while because that's all novices were allowed to use, and I hadn't found a VFO yet. But the Viking Adventurer had a little jack in there that said that you could plug a VFO in there, and so I obtained an already assembled, used Night Kit VFO for that radio. And lo and behold, WA0 Oscar King Victor, CW only as of yet, now could roam the bands with freedom. There were no restrictions back then on frequency allocations. General class licensees in 1967 had the same privileges in terms of frequency on HF as extra class licensees do today, except of course there were no 30, 17, or 12 meter HF bands, no 60 meter band, and so we're a lot better off today really than we were then, even though in terms of some of the operation that takes place, people have always been talking about lids, so I'm not going to talk about lids. I'm going to talk about the fact that that doggone VFO had a drift problem. Now, it was a vacuum tube based VFO, and it annoyed me no end. I could adjust the frequency as I was listening to my own signal in that radio receiver and compensate for the drift. But it kept on drifting for as long as I was on the air. But something I could have done that I never did may have cured that drift. So if you have an old VFO like that and you have a drift problem, here's a suggestion for you. Leave it on all the time. I mean, vacuum tubes back then were easy to replace. I worried that I might, make the tubes age prematurely or something, and well, so what? You replace them. But what I did was turn that thing off as soon as I was done operating it. Things like that take a while to heat up inside, hours perhaps. If I'd have left that thing on indefinitely all the time, just like some people do, in my opinion, foolishly with their computers today, I probably wouldn't have had that problem because all it was a thermal drift. It couldn't have been caused by much of anything else. I mean, what would it be caused by? Magnets being brought nearer and nearer to the radio by invisible little devils called gremlins that infect every amateur radio station in the world? Don't say, I stop there. That's the end of that idea. But I thought nothing of the kind. I thought only of preserving these things that were already old and were easy to replace. I don't know, sometimes, even today, I get fooled and forgetting or not thinking of obvious solutions to problems. So if you have an old VFO like that, try it. Just leave the bloody thing on all the time. Stan Gibilisco signing off, saying 73, best regards in ham radio jargon. and so long, which back in those days still had to come at the end of a QSO out as da-da-da-da-da-da.